Welcome to the Manage Self Lead Others podcast. My name is Nina Sunday, and in this episode my guest from Australia is Lynne Cazaly, who's an international keynote speaker and facilitator and award-winning author of 6 books. And her most recent book is called Ish, The Problem with Our Pursuit for Perfection, the life-changing practice of good enough. And you've lectured at Australian universities. Now, how I first came across you, Lynne, was we both spoke at a conference, a virtual conference this time last year that Julia Steele put on. So she put out a book and you were featured prominently in that book. And the other thing is, my book was a finalist in the award that you won. The Authority Indie Expert Award. Did you go to Namibia to get the award?
No, they ended up not cancelling, but I think they scaled down.
Well, it was just before the COVID lockdown, so to even go overseas was a little bit,
yes,
50-50. But congratulations on being the winner. And when I looked at the book, I totally understood why. You were that standout winner for that award. And what's interesting, Ish is a great title. And here's the thing, most people refer to the word ish as an adjective, as a descriptive word. But you are making it a verb, a doing word, to ish.
Yes.
So I'll just start with, so this is a bit of a mystery perhaps for the listeners, but I'll just start with, it's all about whether you are a perfectionist and whether near enough is good enough and what exactly is near enough, and that's what ishing is. Is that my understanding? Yeah.
Yes. So, as you rightly say, it's like a suffix at the end of a word where we say, oh, I fancy something noodle-ish for dinner, or what time do you want to meet up, or how about 6-ish? So we have this flexibility or a tolerance for imperfection around some things like time, although some sticklers for time probably wouldn't agree with that.
Right.
But we also have an interest around things that are somewhat, to some extent. That's the meaning of ish, to be somewhat or to some extent.
And so we've got this whole two sides of the coin. We've got the people that say that, it has to be perfect, and the others that say, if it's adequate, move forward, because then you get progress. Is that your understanding?
Yes, and there are some things that I want a really high tolerance of, not a high tolerance, but a very high standard. Like, I don't go to the dentist and say, hey, just near enough is good enough, thanks. Just do a rough shot job, don't worry about it. Same with engineers, building bridges, food handling, construction. We want things to be precise and to be as good as they can possibly be, usually to reach some sort of standard. What I was looking at was how we can tend to overwork and overcomplicate and rework things where we're trying to make something perfect. So it's often around the efforts that we put into a task, and we keep working and working and working on it, and it becomes quite wasteful and harmful.
You're absolutely right. And I'm thinking it because a lot of the people that that listen to this podcast might be knowledge workers. By that I mean their tool is the computer. Therefore, their product might be a report, an email. It could be an analysis of a product result. But I'll give you one example. Going back at least a decade, when we put out some training DVDs and put them in bookstores, we got the person, as they finished up, to do an analysis of the profitability of that project, and I thought it'd take a day, and I kept saying, "Oh, how's that report going?" "Oh no, I'm still doing it. It took 5 days. I should have actually stepped in much sooner, because it was more data than I could ever want. But she was obviously a high detail person. I actually threw it away because I went, I don't even want to wade through this. I just want to know, what are our efforts? Was there a return on our energy? That's all.
Yes.
So I
That's
guess
right.
putting purpose with effort is an
Yes.
important part of this.
Yes, definitely, because we know from things like the 80-20, the Pareto principle, how that if we can identify that 20% of valuable work, it will, deliver for us a massive 80% return. Equally, there's other laws like, diminishing returns. Again, we know that you can work on something or invest in something, but at a certain point, you're going to start losing effort, and the effort you do put in becomes wasteful. So for knowledge workers, this is a big thing. When we might hear people say, "Oh, I worked 60 hours this week." Well, wow, what did you do with those hours? And how many mistakes did you make? Like, plenty of us have done things like making errors or working on the wrong document, as we're tiring into the night, or we make changes on the wrong thing. And these are perfect examples of where that pursuit for what's called maximizing. I want more, it's got to be better, I've got to get more references and more research, or I've got to get more data in the case of your report, when instead we should be going for something called satisficing, where something is satisfactory and it suffices for the job. So
You're creating a
satisficing.
whole new language, Lynne. I
Oh,
love
look,
it.
it wasn't me, I'm sorry. It's Herbert Simon's concept of satisficing, but it's a perfect description, and it comes together nicely with some of those other laws of effort and laws of return.
That's lovely. Now, if we can go back to really a little bit of diagnostics, how do you know if you are a perfectionist?
Most are self-confessed. I think there's a bit of a spectrum, that there will be people who say, yes, I'm a bit of a perfectionist on some things. So you just need to have a conversation about stacking the dishwasher, for example, about, which way does cutlery go and where do the glasses go. So some people have quite clear standards about high standards, they'll say. So sometimes people are self-confessed about particular areas. But we would all probably know someone who's a perfectionist, and we know because they might spend an inordinate amount of time on certain tasks to make sure they're perfect. It could be their appearance, it could be the cleanliness of their home. Again, like you were saying, knowledge workers or anyone gathering, working on something. We see it with students a lot, putting in just incredible amounts of time for assignments, studying for exams, like really working themselves into not good places. So we'll see it in behaviour, but we often already know in ourselves that there's something we're a bit of a perfectionist about.
So are there some perfectionists, though, that are really in denial, and they won't even, they won't be able to defend it, even though they're other people around them are saying, we think you are?
Yes. And it's a bit like different flavours of ice cream. There's not really one whole flavour of perfectionism. So you might say, no, I'm not a perfectionist, but I expect other people to deliver very good quality work. Well, that's a type of perfectionism. So there were 3 types identified in Curran and Hill's research, and they're all on the increase. That's why perfectionism is a problem. But the first type of perfectionism is where we hold high standards for ourselves. I will not put that out there until it's perfect. It won't have my name on it until it's done, brilliantly. So that's on the rise, but not as much as the second type of perfectionism, which is this socially prescribed perfectionism, where we believe, wrongly perhaps, we perceive that society expects a high standard from us. And this is the one that's on the increase. I think we see it with people starting businesses, in new jobs, publishers, people writing books, people putting a blog out. Oh, I can't put it out there yet because it wouldn't be accepted, or it's not good enough to meet a particular standard. So that's the second type. And then finally, the third type, not on the rise so much, but it has, it is where we put high standards on others.
If you're in a team, say the team leader is a perfectionist, but if you're thinking about the DISC profile, you've got these high Ds, direct people. They're interested in results, and they will actually get results. But sometimes a perfectionist manager could actually hold that person back if they don't understand that a team needs to be a variety of personalities. Have you got stories about that from the workplace?
Yeah, definitely. There's so much perfectionism in the workplace. And a lot of this research into the topic started when I was having some maybe nightmares about one of my earlier bosses who would just cover my letters and reports and things in red pen. And I thought, this is not school. This is surely this report or this letter is at some point is going to be good enough. Why all these changes? So I make the changes, send it back for final approval. Oh, there's a whole raft of more changes and corrections. And so this happens a lot. Any government employees listening, the number of times documents scale up and down the organisation, getting checked off by people, they make changes and then it goes through other people's inboxes and they'll make changes. So frustrating when you're dealing with a range of different types of perfectionists who are trying to get some control around, the language or the words or the way the graphic looks on the page or the size of the Venn diagram or the font size or the color. There's so much stuff that can be fiddled with in the efforts of a perfectionist trying to kind of wrestle with control over something. So not in a vindictive way either, but just this natural tendency to want to get control over it.
And there's in a sense of standards, but you know what? We're in a world where we need to do more faster, better, faster, but not more perfect. Isn't that right?
That's right. In fact, we don't kind of have time to do perfect except for the things that matter. So it's like, and
medical, dental.
Yes. And safety, you think about in your own organisation or in your own work, what are the things that you should be looking after? We often talk about self-care and looking after ourselves. That's the stuff to get right. Make sure you're fed and watered and nourished and slept so that you're able to do the best that you can do versus pushing on through long, long hours of work trying to get better and better and better, and the results actually show the reverse.
There's a saying that they use in Silicon Valley where it's all about innovation and getting software, beta software out there. It's building the plane while flying the plane.
Yeah,
and definitely. I've said that to some people, and they kind of look at me in horror, like, well, I suppose the image is rather graphic. You don't want to be in a plane that's not finished, but it's just designed to say, listen, don't stop to finish stuff, just move it forward.
They also, some of the other mantras around that technology and software area is stop starting, start finishing. So we can often have lots of things on the go at once, and we're moving ahead a little bit in each of them, trying to make all of them perfect, and we're not actually landing anything. Nothing.
Well, that doesn't sound like a good thing.
Working. No.
And you wouldn't want to be doing that all on the same day, because otherwise it's a version of multitasking, and that's exactly what we say you shouldn't do.
Right.
You've got to focus at least, in time blocks at least. So
yes.
There's a couple of things you talk about in your book, Lynne, that it's like types of thinking. There's default thinking and the other one, which is habitual thinking. But there's a name for that?
Directive,
yes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, or default thinking is the stuff that we do default to. That's some of that habitual stuff. That we can have these patterns quite well wired into what we do. So that's where we might not realise that we're doing something that's not a better way, that there is a better way. So part of working with Ish is getting people to have a go at it, is to say, when I'm working with various clients, we'll say, well, let's say if you're writing a blog, and they say, no, it's not finished yet. But I said, let's press publish anyway, and then we'll cycle back around to it and make some changes to it later. Oh, I can't do that. That's not how I work. That's not the way I work. And go, here's your default network, you know, your usual way of solving things. So instead we say go with more of a directive approach with your brain and say, hey, all I'm doing is putting this first version out there. It's not going to rock the world. It's okay. I'm safe. And I'm going to put it out there, and then I will make some changes to it. And sometimes just that short space of time to take control of your mind is enough to attempt more of a good enough approach and move away from perfectionism.
And it sounds to me, Lynne, like when people say to themselves, that's not how I work, it's kind of not, the language is kind of fairly fixed. They could have say, well, I haven't ever worked like that before. Or, you know, that's kind of more open, more forward thinking, more growth oriented. So do you find that,
right.
and people talk about fixed and growth mindset. Do you think there's an element of that?
Definitely. Particularly if you feel like, yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right with my perfectionism. I have high standards to adhere to. Everything's okay. But if we have a look further, you know, if we have a bit more of a dig into that topic, we might find, no, actually we're exhausted, we're not sleeping well, there's a bunch of things that are undone on our to-do list. And I believe one of the quickest ways to get a few more things done is to launch them, you know, is to say that's good enough. No one's really going to notice. I'm the one that's noticing, but most people don't notice. And this is called the spotlight effect, where that bias, where we think that people are paying more attention to us than they actually are. And I tell you, when I learned about that one, my world changed. I thought, I've been worrying so much about all of these things, and now I know the spotlight effect is in play. Everybody else is worrying about their stuff. They're not going to notice my stuff as much. So, yeah, I'm happy to say, yes, my books have errors in them. Yes, there are mistakes here, there, and everywhere. But you know what? It's out there. I'm moving it forward.
Exactly.
I'm iterating.
You've got 6 books published. I'm impressed. That's really incredible. That's great. And you've got a new one coming up. It's called, let me just see the title, it's about to do with the brain and neuroscience and not overthinking. Tell us about your new book.
Yes, it's called You know that feeling where you
talk like a pirate.
When you have that sense of being overwhelmed. So it's where I say we've got too much information, not enough brain. So it's looking at 3 aspects of overwhelm. The first is the emotional overwhelm we experience when too much is going on. The second aspect is when we have too much workload going on and how to redesign our work. And the third aspect is in regards to information, when we have information overload. So what I'm doing is bringing together those 3 aspects. How do we kind of redefine overwhelm? How do we redesign our work? And how can we redirect our attention when we are, you know, distracted by so many of the things that we can be distracted by?
That book is sorely needed, and I'll give you my angle on it. I was actually just reading today an article about, you know, the sedentary effect and people are sitting for too long. And I discovered this years ago, and so I make sure I get up and have micro breaks frequently because I'm getting the blood pumping, which sends glucose and oxygen to my brain. But I find that people that go, oh, I've got too much to do, they're suffering this overwhelm. I might say, how long have you been sitting at this desk without a break? And they might say, oh, about 2 hours. I said, that's the problem. Your brain can't think when you've been sitting for 2 hours because you've actually drained all the energy and the light from the brain.
That's right.
You need to get moving.
So a few different things kick in there. We get our sponge gets full with information and we can't process anymore. So it's called cognitive overload. And it's like how we feel Zoom fatigue at the end of the day, back-to-back meetings. It's because we're not emptying our truck. So says Seth Godin, he calls that, you can't load up a truck with more gravel if your brain's already full, if your truck's already full.
Absolutely.
So it's a great metaphor of at what points during the day are you unloading your truck so you can deal with the next onslaught.
And it's so you can remember it, because having studied a little bit of neuroscience myself, and I've done a book on how to study for students, I recommend that after 50 minutes, after inputting information, they actually go and spend 10 minutes maybe shooting a basketball through a hoop, or ride a bicycle, or do something physical but non-informational. So their brain can actually take that information and store it somewhere, and they're ready for the next load of new information. And it's the same at work. If managers are sharing information that they want people to remember and action on, well, they need time between meetings to process it, for the brain to actually relax to the next thing. So probably, would you agree that most meetings should at least be no more than 45 minutes, and maybe aim for 30? So, and then you've got that extra time in between the hour?
Or I'd go further and recommend 25-minute meetings. And my colleague Donna McGeorge wrote a fantastic book called The 25-Minute Meeting. So that follows the Pomodoro principle that says that 25 minutes is that kind of optimum performance time. And so she suggests that organisations change their default meetings from probably an hour, like every default meeting in your calendar is probably set to an hour. She says change it to, straight away, just change it to 30 minutes. And her book guides you through how to have those, really efficient meetings. So totally agree with the Pomodoro technique. And that's how I've written books. People go, oh, how do you write so many books? Pomodoro technique. Focus, so pressure, and then release the pressure. Pressure, and then release the pressure.
That's right. And Pomodoro, if people are wondering, it's Italian for tomato, and it's based on the fact that the person that coined it used to have a red tomato-shaped timer.
Yes.
And it would only go for 25 minutes. So, and I recommend it too, because I've used it as well from time to time. So especially for tasks I don't really feel like doing, I just do 25 minutes of it. It's over before you know. Yeah, it's done.
Yes. Sometimes I'll do even less for tasks I don't like.
Right. Well, 5 minutes will do.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you, Lynne, for sharing your wisdom. Links to the books will be on the show notes. And truly enlightening to realise that sometimes we are our own worst enemy.
Yes.
And that we can learn to do things faster, quicker and easier. Thanks for showing.
Don't worry. I have to read my book often, right? So we're recovering perfectionists.
I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Recovering.
I confess up. All right. Thanks so much. So,
thank you, Nina.
Thanks, Lynne. Well, we've been speaking with Lynne Cazaly, and this is Manage Self, Lead Others podcast with Nina Sunday. Subscribe, listen to our other episodes, and it's great talking with Lynne today. Thanks so much, Lynne.
Thank you. Thanks.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.